Hello and a very warm welcome. You're watching Policy Watch with your host, Kriti Mishra. The government is likely to release a new draft of the proposed e-commerce policy. The draft has been discussed in an inter-ministerial meeting and the government will hold consultations with various stakeholders before unveiling the final policy. Rapid internet penetration, low cost of data and smartphone access has led to an increased adoption of e-commerce in India, a trend that will continue as more Indians come online. Since 2014, Government of India has announced various initiatives like Digital India, Make in India, Startup India, Skill India and Innovation Fund, and timely and effective implementation of these schemes support the growth of e-commerce in the country. And to discuss the way forward, I'm joined by Mr. Anand Singh Bhal, former Senior Economic Advisor, DPIIT, Ministry of Commerce and Industry, and Mr. Dilip Chinoy, Secretary General, FICCI. Welcome to Sunset TV, both of you. And Mr. Bhal, coming to you first. E-commerce has transformed the way business is done in India. The Indian e-commerce market is expected to grow to $200 billion by 2026 from $38.5 billion as of 2017. Much of the growth for the industry has been triggered by an increase in internet and smartphone penetration. What are your expectations from the upcoming policy?
This e-commerce policy has been under consultation, if I know, for the last 1.5 to 2 years. So this fast-changing technology, there's no denying that it's a very transformative concept and it has revolutionized retail in a huge way. And if you're not on the e-commerce bandwagon, you're missing out on a lot of things. But as with all disruptive technologies, to balance the trade-offs between sellers, buyers, the asymmetric information, and the huge expansion is a tough task, and the government realizes this. So the first thing the government deeply realizes is there should be a wide consultation. So there's a draft policy which has come out. Number of stakeholder meetings have been held where FICCI, CII, and all the trade bodies have been involved. Inter-ministerial consultations have been held. And, a couple of so many ministries involved. There's Consumer Affairs for protection. There's Information Technology Ministry for the IT thing. And the income tax people out there. So all these multifarious bodies have to be brought on a platform. So the draft policy is a work in progress. It has just come out. We have still further way to go, how to handle data, how to allow for consumer protection. But there's no denying that e-commerce is the way ahead. But of course, to keep in perspective, globally, e-commerce sales last year were about $64 trillion. And only about 4.2 trillion was through e-commerce. So consumer sales last year globally was $64 trillion, but e-commerce was only $4.6 trillion. So let's keep that in perspective also. But there's no denying, as you rightly say, that e-commerce is the way to go, and we have to harness the huge potential and sort of manage the risks well. Yeah.
All right, Mr. Chinoy, coming to you now. How will the proposed policy ensure that network effects do not create digital monopolies which could misuse their dominant market position?
No, I think you have to see the current draft policy in light of the press note 2, which was announced in 2018, and which actually very clearly states that you will not have that type of intermediation, or it says that it will only act like a marketplace. So you can't do inventory-based sales if you want FDI. FDI is allowed as 100% there. So the challenge here was that some of the provisions in that press note 2 were being interpreted differently by different players and different stakeholders. And the attempt in this rounds of consultation was to find a way forward, and at the same time that ensure that there is policy stability, there is transparency and continuity in the policy. And the idea here was to see that if there is the policy, is it being implemented? Is it being followed by every e-commerce player? If it is not, then what is the process that needs to happen there? And really, I think the government is very clearly focused on growth, employment creation, promotion of medium and small industries through e-commerce, promotion of startups through e-commerce. And it was also going to focus on boosting collaboration between offline and online suppliers. So the whole attempt is to remove ambiguity, to ensure continuity and stability, and ensure that all stakeholders have equal access and consumers are also benefited. Like, Anand Singh Bell said that, how do you ensure that everything sold through the net is actually not,
Yes.
something is not fake or something is not counterfeit or some piracy does not happen. Whether you are getting what you paid for or you're getting something, whether expired goods don't come, what is the kind of process there. So multiple facets of the various aspects of the e-commerce activity are being seen in light of the Press Note 2 of 2018. And of course, there was a draft e-commerce policy, as Mr. Bell mentioned, and then comments were invited. And this is a further round of consultations and comments.
You made a very important point, Mr. Chinoy, about consumer rights. Mr. Bhal, the discussion, of course, focuses on the fact that e-commerce operators must ensure to bring out clear and transparent policies on discounts, including the basis of discount rates funded by the platforms for different products, supplies, and implications of participation and non-participation in discount schemes as well, so as to ensure fair and equal treatment. How do we protect the rights of the consumers?
In the ministry, there were a lot of representations from small brick and mortar shopkeepers also, that they cannot compete with the deep discounts being offered by these big e-commerce companies. So you see, that was one strong lobby which also works, and the ministry and the different ministries also got together to see that, that inventory-based e-commerce not be allowed under FDI. And the government is very strong on protecting the interests of both the brick and mortar shopkeepers and, of course, of the consumers also. I mean, it is e-commerce has to be harnessed, as I argued initially. Spurious goods should not be sold. The consumer should have a right to grievance of his redressals. There are a lot of goods which come under e-commerce. They are spurious goods, as Dilip was saying. So should there be an online redressal agency, or should there be an independent redressal agency? So the government is seized of the fact, and it's very particular that the asymmetric information between these platforms and the small brick and mortar stores and the consumers be sort of managed properly. It's so it is very much there, and the interests of the consumers are being kept in the heart. There's a Department of Consumer Affairs also which looks at the consumer affairs grievances, and it's very much in the radar and being looked after.
Absolutely, and the debate also continues, Mr. Chinoy, on creating a level playing field for all the stakeholders.
Yeah, I think that is what I was referring to when the whole discussion was around the existing Press Note 2 and what is the roles and responsibilities of different things, whether it is online, offline, whether it is Indian companies, whether it is the foreign companies, whether it is companies who want to sell certain products online and not there could be a choice between only online and only retail, but then taking stuff which is on retail, which is available there, and moving it completely online. So there are multiple kind of challenges which the policy has to address, and therefore the whole discussion with the different types of stakeholders, the small and medium industry, with the trading community, with different organizations, and eventually they're going to have individual discussions with the companies themselves to get a perspective. I think the intent is very clear, that the policy, there should be continuity, stability, and the policy should become more transparent, so that everybody is comfortable in its implementation and and the way forward, and we can collectively grow the e-commerce market. You see, the lockdown has taught us many things. The contactless delivery. I've been on your shows earlier during the lockdown talking of other aspects, but the importance of e-commerce, and reaching out to other aspects of the whole retail structure. But I think the balance has to be maintained, as Mr. Anand Singh Bell said, that the deep discounting, other issues, whether it is only offered online, offline, etc. The people who are selling that offline have the same capacity to do that as online. So I think these are the challenges that the policy is grappling with, and the purpose of this consultation is to understand the different viewpoints, and the government will finally take a view.
But also the fact that e-commerce in India right now is governed by several regulations under various ministries. Mr. Bhal, what kind of holistic mechanism is needed?
So, you very rightly said the gamut of issues under e-commerce is being handled by different ministries. There's consumer affairs, there's income tax, there's the IT for IT thing, there's commerce, there's DPIIT. As you all know, initially the first draft consultation paper on e-commerce was brought out by Department of Commerce. And then it was realized, okay, no, let it push it to DPIIT, Department of Industry. It should be their baby. So we all are seized of the fact the number of departments involved with different sort of stakeholders, and so the Department of Industry is struggling with it. Sometimes there's a bit of exasperation, saying, what are we doing in e-commerce when there's a consumer affairs department doing protecting consumers, when there's a data protection ministry, IT doing their bit. So where do we come in? But then there's the role of a coordinating agency, and which is what exactly DPIIT is doing, sort of coordinating the thing and putting it all together with the consultation with FICCI and CIA and the industry bodies. So that is what I'll say. The role of DPIIT is that of a sort of consolidating agency, which is putting together the multifarious strands and coming out with a holistic policy.
Of course, and we do need a coordinated approach, but Mr. Chinoy, retailer bodies have also called for a TRAI-like regulator for e-commerce. What would it mean for the e-commerce space?
No, I think the thing is not a TRAI-like regulator. The thing is that, okay, if there is some regulatory interpretation issue, or there is some issue, in the whole e-commerce marketplace, what is the process of redressal? If it is like, as a customer, you're going in to another, you bought a product and the marketplace entity is not listening to your complaint, etc. You make a complaint. What is the process of escalating that complaint? What is the due to consumer court? Where is the jurisdiction? Which jurisdiction has the court has the jurisdiction? Whether it is the place where the good originated or whether you bought it. In a physical space, there is a very clear transparency to do that. If there is a deep discounting issue, there's some other issue. Then what is their mode of redressal? Right, and can we make a very simple redressal and keep it out of the courts, and also that the redressal is very, very quickly, and that everybody actually benefits, because it is important aspect of growing this whole sector, because it can promote goods manufactured in India, it can promote exports, it can promote small and medium enterprises, but you need a system by which, if any stakeholder has a grievance, whether it's related to consumer, or related to activity, or related to anything, you have a forum where you can clearly identified forum which can take a quick decision.
So you talked about grievances. I'd also like to understand, because right now what we are getting to hear is that under the new draft e-commerce policy, operators shall ensure that algorithms used are not biased, and that no discrimination due to digitally induced biases is prevalent. Help us understand the importance of these algorithms and how do they work?
See, this use of artificial intelligence, machine learning, algorithms, I mean, it's a very new beast which has come in the market. I won't say new, but it's a beast which is yet to be tamed and yet to be understood. So, while we fully appreciate that algorithms should not be biased and artificial learning should be sort of inclusive and what have you, but the finer details, dotting the I's and crossing the T's, is yet to be done. We fully realize, I mean, this is a sort of, artificial intelligence is, if I may exaggerate, is a sort of monster which has been uncaged. And now which way it will go, how much will you be able to tame it, what should be the sort of trade-offs for the different entities involved is something which is a work in progress. And I'm sure we'll come around to a sort of optimal, so there cannot be a sort of really rational mechanistic solution. There has to be an optimal solution based on the sort of interests of the different stakeholders. And that's the way the democratic process goes. And that's where the way the consultations are going on.
Absolutely. It's all about the stakeholders and their interests. Mr. Chinoy, the moot question remains, how do we strike a balance, catering to the interest of various stakeholders while also keeping the policies at pace with the digital expansion undertaken by the e-commerce giants?
So what the whole discussion so far has actually been leading up to how we can actually ensure that. So your last question was using digital algorithms to push particular products or something. So the idea is first that if it is, the policy has to be transparent. Everybody needs to know what the policy states. The second, we need stability in policy. It should not be off on today, because then whole thing. The third aspect is that the policy should look at it, have all, you raised the SME thing, you talked of the consumer effect, you talked about the grievance redressal, you talked about algorithms, you talked about enabling equal access, you talked about predatory. So the policy has to look at all of these aspects, and then it'll come out there. Most of the actual format is already there. The thing was, the interpretation, and if there is a difference in interpretation, how do you go? Where do you go for a redressal? Is it Department of Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, or that's why they're saying have an independent regulator with quasi-judicial powers who can actually decide this. So I think the whole attempt by the government is to bring in a transparent, stable policy that takes the interests of all the stakeholders and ensures the growth and development of this sector in India, and therefore furthering products made in India. Many of the e-commerce companies are also stepping up efforts to export products from India. They have special corners for handicrafts, arts and crafts. In August, in another show with you, we were talking about how that could be done. So I think that is the challenge that the government is trying to address, and therefore the inter-ministerial consultations, therefore the industry consultations, and therefore all the stakeholder consultations going forward.
And also that leads me to the question on privacy. Mr. Bhal, how will the proposed policy ensure privacy of data or prevent misuse of data?
So the privacy of data is a issue which is much in discussion. We are trying to sort of also copy from the European data regulation, and the Ministry of Information Technology, is working on whether the data, belong to the consumer or does it belong to the platform? Who should have access to it? Should I, as a say shopkeeper, getting a lot of data on consumers, does the data belong to that shopkeeper, that platform, or does it belong to the consumer? Or what portion of it belongs to that platform and what proportion to the consumer? All these issues need to be sorted out. And of course, there's a lot of strong emphasis on ensuring the privacy of the individual, the data which he is generating, and to what extent he should have access to it. So China initially didn't allow its data to be put in servers outside, but they're also having a rethink. Similarly in India, if you want e-commerce to grow, you'll have to have a slightly broader perspective. You cannot be very sort of, evangelical about data privacy and all that. That is important. But there is finally a trade-off. Too much data control, the e-commerce will not the global players will not come in. But then you can't have a loose thing also. So it is a tightrope walk, and no one better than, I think, Mr. Dilip Chinoy to tell you further on this issue.
Mr. Chinoy, you'd like to make a point on that?
I think the data privacy is a very challenging point, and that's why when Anand started the whole discussion, he said multiple ministries are involved. If you note that the data privacy bill is also under this thing, and whether that overrides the e-commerce policy is another challenge which we'll see. Obviously, the data privacy thing will be right. Also, the RBI mandates storage of financial data within the country. That's another challenge here. There is a new regulation which has come, which is talking about who can store credit card information.
Right.
All right. And all of these are issues and challenges, because this is a new and evolving world. Actually, technology is changing far faster, and new challenges are coming up every day. And I think that all the policy makers and the government and everybody is trying to actually adjust to this new fast pace of change to enable that we have a policy that is fairly coherent, stable, transparent, allows for grievance redressal both for individual consumers and other people who are impacted by it. And that is really what the government is looking for. At the same time, promoting small and medium industry in India, promoting made in India products, and all avoiding discrimination, etc. So I think that's the real objective here.
Mr. Bhal, e-commerce marketplaces are today the best possible enablers for transformation at minimal cost, innovation and investment. In India, how will e-commerce marketplaces drive the MSME makeover?
It's almost become mandatory for all MSME people to sort of get onto the e-commerce bandwagon. See, in a way, it's a very liberating instrument, the e-commerce. Small manufacturers can sort of showcase their products, and they can do away with the host of middlemen in between and reach the consumers directly. So this platform of e-commerce is really inclusive, I would say, provided you have the basic technological skills, and it's very liberating. A small MSME handicraft manufacturer or small machine maker can, showcase his products. The world is sitting and watching, and if they like your thing, this is the time for, niche marketing also. So the MSME sector is one sector which will really, hopefully grow with the e-commerce. And, a typical example is a handicraft, a small, let's say, Madhubani painting gentleman in Madhubani, Bihar, and he's showcasing his products and he's getting demand from all over the place. So his quality improves, his marketing improves, and then he evolves onto a bigger thing. So the MSME sector, I'm sure, will be one of the real big beneficiaries of this e-commerce platform and policy.
All right, before I end this conversation, Mr. Chinoy, your closing comments, and as Mr. Bhal said, MSME makeover and e-commerce India, that is going to be the trend. Do you agree?
Yes, and actually, I was hoping that he'd mentioned two government platforms which are actually enabling that. If you look at the government e-marketplace you look at the e-national agricultural marketplace, both are really empowering tools for small and medium businesses and for small and medium farmers to reach their products to the markets at a very efficient and convenient way, and ensuring that payments are made, ensuring that you have a redressal thing going on. So we need more of this to come in as we go up ahead. And I'm sure that the small and medium industries will find this a great opportunity to leverage and to grow and access the world.
So it's all about unlocking these massive opportunities. On that note, thank you so much for joining us. So all eyes would be on this much awaited e-commerce policy. That's all we had for you in this edition of Policy Watch. Thanks for watching and stay tuned.